indicating what I propose dealing with. The first is the question of jurisdiction. The second will be the question of accountability of the executive in relation to the National Assembly. The third, I will illustrate in what respects we contend that the National Assembly has failed in its duty to hold the executive accountable in relation to what we contend are prima facie impeachable offenses by the President. And then the last point is the question of remedy.
So what this inquiry is meant to do is to investigate the fitness of Advocate Chauke to hold office as a prosecutor, and in particular in the capacity of Director of Public Prosecutions. Do you believe that Advocate Chauke is not fit to hold the office that he currently holds?
With the evidence I have, I don't think he is not unless there's other evidence.
Yes, well, I mean, we can't work on other evidence other than the evidence you know. So according to you, he is fit to hold the office he currently holds?
Maybe for the records, I need to clarify this.
No. Just answer my question first before you clarify things for the record. I'm trying to understand your answer. On the evidence that you have in front of you, you say you do not believe that he is not fit. So that's a negative for saying he is fit.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
President Cyril Ramaphosa is set to usher in a notable chapter for South Africa's judiciary with the appointment of Thembeka Ngcukaitobi SC as an acting justice of the Constitutional Court of South Africa, a move widely viewed as both symbolic and substantive in reshaping the country's highest court. Ngcukaitobi, a formidable legal mind, known for his sharp constitutional arguments and commanding courtroom presence, will assume his acting role from 1 June 2026. Although the presidency has yet to formally announce the appointment, reports indicate the decision was finalized last week, signaling a strategic intervention at a crucial moment for the apex court. His elevation is significant on multiple fronts. At 49, Ngcukaitobi is believed to be the first black advocate appointed directly from the bar to serve in an acting capacity at the Constitutional Court, a milestone that underscores the slow but evolving transformation of South Africa's legal profession. It also highlights a growing willingness to draw top legal talent directly from litigation practice into judicial leadership roles. The appointment follows closely on Ramaphosa's recent selection of Justice Nambitha Dumbaza and Catherine Savage, a move that tipped the Constitutional Court into becoming one of the few women-majority apex courts globally. Together, these decisions suggest a deliberate effort to recalibrate both the demographic and intellectual composition of the bench. Ngcukaitobi's career trajectory reads like a blueprint of post-apartheid constitutional litigation since his admission to Johannesburg Bar in 2010 and subsequent elevation to senior counsel in 2020. He has been at the forefront of some of the country's most consequential legal battles. His work has consistently intersected with questions of accountability, governance, and historical redress. He played a prominent role during the state capture inquiry led by former Chief Justice Raymond Zondo, where his legal acumen was instrumental in unpacking complex networks of alleged corruption. He was also involved in litigation tied to former President Jacob Zuma, including matters linked to Nkandla controversy, cases that helped define constitutional accountability in the democratic era. Beyond the courtroom, Ngcukaitobi has carved out a reputation as a leading scholar on land reform and property law. His book, The Land is Ours, is widely regarded as a seminal text on land disposition and restitution, reinforcing his standing as a critical voice in debates over economic justice and transformation. This expertise is expected to be particularly relevant as the Constitutional Court continues to grapple with disputes over land tenure. redistribution, and socio-economic rights. Internationally, Ngubane has also represented South Africa on the global stage, contributing to legal arguments before the International Court of Justice, further cementing his profile as a jurist of both domestic and international stature. Despite his achievements, his career has not been without controversy. At one point, Zuma accused him of collusion with Zondo during the state capture proceedings, claims that added a political dimension to his otherwise distinguished legal career. Nevertheless, Ngubane has largely maintained a reputation grounded in rigorous legal reasoning and a commitment to constitutional principles. His upcoming tenure, which is expected to run until November 2026, will serve as a more than temporary assignment. Within legal circles, it is already being viewed as a potential audition for permanent appointment to the bench, a test of how his courtroom prose translates into judicial decision-making at the highest level. Importantly, Ngubane is no stranger to the bench. He has previously served as an acting judge in both the High Court and the Land Claims Court, experiences that have equipped him with the judicial temperament required for the demanding environment of the Concourt, often referred as the Green Chambers. As South Africa navigates an era marked by the complex constitutional questions from executive accountability to land reform, Ngubane's presence on the bench is expected to bring intellectual depth and a transformative perspective to the court's deliberations. Whether his appointment ultimately leads to a permanent position remains to be seen, but for now it stands as a defining moment, not just in his career but in the ongoing evolution of South Africa's constitutional democracy. Meanwhile, the legal sector transformation at risk as top law firms challenge the BBBEE in landmark court battle. While the public gallery in the Gauteng High Court was on Monday packed to the brim with members of the legal fraternity, the country's top legal minds present their legal arguments in the legal challenge against and for the BEE Legal Sector Code LSC. The formal arguments will only start on Tuesday. The legal challenge, brought by four of the country's biggest law firms, Dennis Reitz, earlier known as Nathan Rose, Fulbright, Weber Wenzel, Workmans, and Bowmans, which will take a look at transformation in the legal profession, has been set down for the entire week. The proceedings only resumed at lunchtime as the parties have been in discussions with each other since Sunday. Advocate Thembeka Ngubane, who's representing three of the law firms, told Judge Nicolene Janse van Nieuwenhuizen that the discussions will meanwhile proceed and they may or may not get somewhere with it. The nature of the discussions was not divulged. The applications also asked the court to consider holding the proceedings virtually, but the majority of the defendants, which include the Justice Minister and various law bodies, insisted on open court due to the public interest in the matter. They pointed out that members from the legal fraternity traveled from across the country to attend the proceedings. In ruling for the open court option, the judge, who is sitting with other judges, commented that this is a matter of grave public interest. Bowmans, Weber, Wenzel, and Vexmans argued that the LSC in its present form is unlawful, unworkable, and risks undermining rather than advancing meaningful broad-based transformation in the legal profession, harming the very people it is supposed to benefit. They will therefore ask for the court to set aside the LSC. The code was published by the Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition, Pakstow, in September 2024. In their heads of argument, the three firms make clear that they support meaningful, inclusive, and sustainable transformation of the legal profession, both within their firms and across the wider legal sector. Their case is that the current LSC is fundamentally misconceived in design and effect, and that it will hinder rather than advance meaningful broad-based transformation. The LSC exempts more than 95% of legal practices from its requirement. According to the papers, legal entities with between 1 and 3 partners make up to 95.07% of legal practices, yet the LSC does not apply to them because they fall below the turnover threshold for compliance. The firms argued that a code that applies to less than 5% of the profession cannot credibly transform the sector as a whole. The firms further argued that the defects in the LSC have real-world consequences for broad-based transformation. According to them, if the LSC is allowed to stand, those most likely to lose are people and institutions that rely on practical, broad-based pathways into and through the legal sector. These, they say, include Black law students, young graduates, Black professionals in management, persons with disabilities, and the public interest organizations that expand access to justice. What's your take on this one, people? Thanks for watching. Please subscribe for more news.